Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. We're still looking at developments in Burundi. Now, as you heard, what Gabe Josdo for the Voice of America just gave us the latest. And in reality, Burundi has little or no support from the international community as regards the elections which commenced today. One of the bodies which has washed its hands clean of the electoral activities in the East African nation is the African Union. The African Union chairperson of the Commission of the AU, that's Dr. Nkosazana Lamini Zuma, has announced that the Union will not observe Burundi's local and parliamentary elections. In addition to that, the AU also says Burundi has not met conditions to allow free and fair elections in compliance with the relevant provisions of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. Well, we're joined from the nation's capital by the former Chief of Staff to the AU Chairman, Ambassador John Chinkaye. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Cynthia.
We're very glad to have you, Ambassador. Now, we'd just like to start by asking you, now that the AU wants nothing to do with the ongoing elections in Burundi, what does this say about the credibility?
Oh, it says a lot. It means that, as the AU itself has said, the election will lack credibility. But let me just reaffirm that the AU Chairperson Commission's statement is a restatement of what the African Union Peace and Security Council meeting in Johannesburg, which was chaired by our president a few weeks ago in Johannesburg, stated that if the elections were the date was not delayed, the process of putting in place credible elections would be missing. And Burundi has refused to delay the election, which means that the African Union will follow through what the Peace and Security Council decision, the decision that was made. It means that AU will not accompany Burundi. It means that other organizations which take their cue from the AU might follow suit, including the UN and the EU.
Well, Ambassador, does this in any way threaten the membership of Burundi as regards the African Union?
Regrettably, I don't think it does, because we do not, it's not part of the norm yet for AU to suspend member states who do not follow through all the democratic principles contained in the African Union Charter, because that charter has not come into force yet, and Burundi is acting on its own, but without the support of its neighbors in the East African community.
Yes.
And the African Union. But
okay.
I don't think that there is any provision that provides for its suspension.
Well, Ambassador, just if I let you go, just to deviate to another issue here, we did speak to one of the Al Jazeera journalists who was sentenced in absentia, that's Sue Turton, and she did mention that the African Union could play a big role in applying pressure or putting pressure on the Egyptian government. What role should the AU be playing concerning the Al Jazeera journalists whose trial has been postponed yet again today?
Well, I think that the African Union itself directly may not be able to play a role other than appealing to Egypt, because this is an internal affair of Egypt. But through the African Commission for Human and People's Rights in China, which has provisions for the protection of journalists, and which has a special rapporteur on the freedom of expression and access to information, can act on behalf of the African Union. And I believe it is already doing so.
Yes. Well, Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on the program. As always, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for calling me.
Thank you. Now, speaking of the Al Jazeera journalists, they will have to wait for another month before they get any closer to the possibility of being set free. That's because an Egyptian court said it would issue a ruling on July the 30th in the retrial of two of the Al Jazeera television journalists previously sentenced to 7 to 10 years in prison. Mohamed Fahmy, a naturalized Canadian who has given up his Egyptian citizenship, and Egyptian Baher Mohammed were previously charged with aiding a terrorist organization. That's a reference to the banned Muslim Brotherhood. A third journalist, that's Australian Peter Grester, was deported in February after renouncing his Egyptian citizenship. While the Egyptian government continues its crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood and people affiliated with it, radical groups continue to target members of the judiciary. This morning, Egypt's public prosecutor was injured when a car bomb struck his convoy, and we just have reports right now that he's actually died from those wounds, and the convoy was hit while he was leaving his home in Cairo. Some sources say a car bomber had rammed into the convoy of Hisham Barakat, while other sources say the car bomb was apparently detonated remotely. 2 civilians and 2 policemen were also wounded in the process. Judges and other officials have increasingly been targeted by Islamist militants opposed to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and apparently angered by hefty prison sentences imposed on members of the now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. Well, still to come on Network Africa. Interior ministers from Britain, France and Germany lay flowers at the scene of Friday's beach attack in which dozens of tourists were shot dead. Details in a moment. Please stay with us.